So you pull this mech out, put it on the hex map, and right away you notice the Rifleman, classic. You notice those arms, the guns in the arms, and you have this vision of just it laying waste, laying firepower, laser power, autocannon power down on the table as perhaps one of the most iconic support mechs in the Inner Sphere. That's the narrative. That's what I see, and certainly the Rifleman is up there as a classic mech. But how does it stack on the table? As a mech warrior, as a mech commander, how can we utilize this? Now, one of the things that we see in Battletech across all weight classes, I like to use as a starting point, is the definitive role. What it's looking to do, in theory, what it actually does, and then integrating that into a lance. And I see the Rifleman, the design theory, is as a support type mech, meaning it sits somewhere, parks somewhere, hopefully in cover, hopefully a little elevation, and it lays down firepower every turn on the table. It can add a little bit of dice if you're engaging with your lance. It can soften things up. Maybe it's going to try and get some motive hits. Maybe it's just going to take a lucky shot. Or likewise, as part of a lance, advancing with your other mechs, a support mech is, as soon as something is in range, every turn it is laying down fire. It's adding dice, it's removing armor, it's working to leverage from that perspective, kind of like a gun mech or a gun star. But the challenge with the Rifleman, of course, like many of the Inner Sphere, unseen, reseen, soon to be seen again, you have 10 heat sinks. Now let's kind of put that aside for a minute. We're looking at stock. 2 large lasers, 2 autocannons in the arms, and 2 medium lasers. That's a decent amount of firepower. And the autocannon 5s, they can reach out. They have a good mix of range, heat / damage. You've got 2. You've got that redundancy. That's okay. You can shoot that every turn. As things get closer, now this is where things get interesting. As things get closer, you've got the autocannon and you've got the medium lasers. In theory, you can fire both of those medium lasers and the autocannons, start to generate a little heat. You don't really want to be running or moving. But if we define this as a support mech, then ideally you have a good vantage point to sit and fire and park, or as part of a lance, you're trailing a little bit behind, and then you're going to stop moving, and you're going to shoot for a turn or two. The outliers are the large lasers. Good range, okay damage, but the heat is off the scale. So you kind of get into making this choice of, if we're going to try and manage heat, that doesn't mean zero it out every turn, but keep it manageable in that you're not having to worry about ammo or shut down and trying to keep the modifiers down a little bit. You can fire a large laser and an autocannon, or a large laser and 2 autocannons, although that's going to start to generate a little bit of heat, even if you're walking and running. It doesn't have the fire discipline to fire both of these weapons at the same time. There's no way you're firing 2 large lasers. And even if you were, I mean, this is coming from a mech warrior myself who does push the heat, it just doesn't have the heat sinks to be moving and shooting. To fire both large lasers, the payoff if I miss, I mean, that has to be like a point blank, you didn't move, I didn't move type shot. But to be able to fire those if I'm moving, the heat is just too much. It's way too much to stack up to warrant the potential damage output. So we see with the Rifleman, you're not really firing enough as a support mech. It's almost like I'd like to see, and I don't often get into mech design that much, I'd like to see him drop down the large lasers to maybe other autocannons. But then, we're looking at something like the Jaeger mech, or we're looking at something like the Blackjack. There's other alternative fire support type mechs that can do what the Rifleman does a little bit better. Certainly iconic. I've seen it attached to support lances. I've seen it actually attached to a recon lance. Playing it surprisingly with lighter mechs, if you know you're going to be engaging lighter mechs, because you have the movement with the autocannons to lay down some firepower. And if those pesky light mechs like to get a little bit close, you can push those large lasers, which, has some bite against light mechs. But the Rifleman is an interesting mech. Like the Crusader and a few others that we've looked at, I really think it needs massive fire discipline, extreme fire discipline to really make it shine on the tabletop. So your thoughts, because what's true in Battletech, and admittedly, I have a couple of quirky mechs that I love to play all the time, and if we just look at them, pure Tactica, yeah, they are kind of rubbish. But this is Battletech, and the mech that you've inherited is what you've inherited, and I like to play a variety of mechs to tactically challenge myself and ask the question, how can we leverage this on the table? You're going into combat with a Rifleman as a mech commander. That's what you have at your disposal. In the comments, in the questions, how do we get the best? How do we get the most out of this machine?